The universe is an ever-changing being, with beginnings and endings constantly in motion. Dreams and hopes are melded together to create ideas that create creation. This creation is beautiful, yet what comes after can be seen just as beautiful in itself. Destruction. Everything was setting in a glorious fashion, but with downfalls, the cycle repeats and we get
Grand Returns. We're talking about Grand Returns. I know it was a little over dramatic, over the top, but it's just like trying to be cool or something. Like, I know it didn't really come off, but Grand Returns and Great Revivals, they're pretty big deals, but not just in the grand scheme of the universe, but also in the media we consume. You may be wondering, what's with the two different names? Well, it's just made up semantic blah blah whatever, they're basically the same. Or are they? In this modern day, there is a larger emphasis on these grand returns and great revivals you may see with reboots, remakes, and whatever. So, why is that? Well, we're gonna find that out. But first, we need a clear definition of what these things are so we don't keep tripping over our words like seen earlier. So, Grand Returns and Great Revivals, they're relatively similar in concept. I mean, yes, they are in reality as well, but I just mean more so how they're going to be presented in this video. See, I define a grand return as a return to an old story after a period of time. This can be through a new season of the show that hasn't been seen in a while, or with a movie or a sequel. The consensus here is that grand returns are typically unfinished, pre-established stories that return from either a long hiatus or an uncancellation. On the other hand, there's the Great Revivals, which can be similar setup to a grand return, but there are a few key differences. Many Great Revivals typically are reboots or retellings of a story from before. Great Revivals also tend to follow either the previous story very closely or go in a completely different direction. But here's the thing, beyond these simple examples, things get a lot more in the gray zone. For example, where do we put stuff like the Doom reboots, or the spin-off series like Legend of Korra? Well, I'll be completely honest with you, I've got no clue! I'm just going to go with over what the hell I think is correct at the moment, and if you disagree, you probably have a well-reasoned argument that would be interesting to see, so feel free to comment below. So, with these poorly defined definitions, I think it's time we talked about some of the good examples, some of the bad examples, and see if we can figure out why the heavens we keep doing the same story over and over again. Let's start negative. Grand Returns and Great Revivals, many have grand and great in their names, but a lot of the times, they in fact aren't. I mean, you'd think projects remaking something to rekindle love for an IP would all be so heartfelt. Oh wait, no, they're not. A lot of these bad returns and revivals are formed out of one thing: money. But so many corporations who own these intellectual properties don't give two fucks about the fans' wants. They just care about the fact that fans are there, and that means money, baby! So, you tend to see two common trends amongst these bad examples. A, they were made because an IP got or has been popular, and they don't want the series to die, so things will be churned out at an excessive rate. Or B, your favorite IP has entered into peak nostalgia times, where all of the individuals who enjoyed watching it as kids have grown up a bit and are able to invest in products because, ooh, it's just like my childhood. Pretty smart, but also just a tad bit manipulative if you ask me. But these two aren't the only factors in making bad returns or revivals. See, if you ask me, there's also the autonomy behind the project, the passion that should be there, but usually isn't in these bad products. I mean, okay, look at this, and tell me if this seems familiar to you.
Oh man, it's great to be back. I mean, what? We were here the whole time. Wink, wink.
Hi, don't you know it's actually current year here? There's so many trendy trends to talk about, like TikTok and technology and TikTok and electric vehicles and TikTok and, oh, did I mention TikTok? By Kesha?
Wow, all this stuff is pretty crazy. I cannot lie.
Whoa, Character A, you can't say that. You're gonna get cancelled.
Wow, peak cinema there, right? But you did recognize those cliches, those weirdly common scenarios in both Grand Returns and Great Revivals. Now, I couldn't tell you exactly why this is the case. However, when tropes like these pop up, they're typically done in a way where you can tell that there was no care put into the media. Here's the thing. These topics on their own aren't or don't have to be bad. I think if you've got good character writing and natural dialogue, you can make anything an interesting scenario. However, most instances of modern scenarios and writing for grand returns and great revivals typically only use surface level dialogue or very cheap out jokes. And that's where the main issue lies for me. The energy, the characters, the writing. I understand that sometimes writers can't come back on projects for a myriad of reasons, or maybe there's just new and experienced writers who aren't used to writing with these characters that have a legacy to live up to. But that's a bad excuse in my opinion. I think good writers can look at what these characters were in their previous adventures, remakes, or continuations, and evolve them beyond the caricatures of what they are, giving them good comedy, good storytelling and depths, and even talking about things that could in fact be cringy if done poorly. However, that's never the case, is it? It all boils back to the bag these people are getting. Who cares about bringing back old stories when you can nostalgia pander for 12 episodes and call it a day? It's like hanging out with that friend you don't do anything with except reminisce on when things were good, except the friend is getting paid to only reminisce and not make new memories because there's a small chance they could be bad and not what people like. Even if the return or revival is made out of passion, sometimes it just doesn't work. People can miss what made their concepts good in the first place, and especially when it's the original creator. Sometimes that work can just not be replicated in the same way because things change with time. People too, the way they write and the way they think, it may not reflect where they are in the mind space they were X amount of years ago when they originally wrote the story. For me, the main issue with grand returns and great revivals is that they're so easy to cash in on, which means even if there are hidden gems, there's a whole lot of slop that does nothing for anyone. So, how do you make these returns and revivals great again? Look, I know I've been giving all these grand returns and great revivals a bunch of sad and bad reputations, but do not worry, creativity isn't dead and no, AI isn't gonna kill it. Not yet, at least. See, there's a lot of good to be had from these returns and revivals, and trust me, there are good ways to do them. For this section, I'm going to be referencing the Adventure Time Distant Land series that was released on HBO Max somewhat recently, as I believe all 4 of these episodes are correct ways to do good grand returns. So, how do you do a good grand return after a story has reached its natural conclusion? Well, I think there's 4 ways to do it. 1. A prequel can be a good way to expand the world and add history while following a character that has untold parts of their lives. 2. You can follow a side character and have them do completely different things that didn't happen in the original story. 3. You can follow the main characters but in a completely new scenario. Or 4. You can just have a completely unrelated story in the same world. You may have noticed, but these grand returns tend to require some creativity and more so relate to story-based media rather than sitcom-esque ones. These 4 can be seen in a myriad of places. A good prequel can really help influence how we see the worlds of these characters. They can answer questions we just didn't get to see answered before or give greater depths to characters who really needed it. Yes, there can be some prequels that totally ruin the original story's characters, but most of the time, they're super fun to see happen, especially for hardcore fans of a show. A side character story is also a very interesting one, and you better hope and pray the creators choose characters that are characters and not caricatures. You see what I did there? But these stories typically have more relation to the main media, just how it affects other characters or what other characters do post-main story. They can sometimes be like an epilogue series for other characters, that is if they take place after the main story. Some just happen concurrently. These aren't immune from being bad though, they can just be good sometimes, you know? Now, following the main characters again, well, this is usually what grand returns tend to be when you see the endearing character once again, as they do whatever they're doing. How well it's done is determined by how well this character can adapt and what stories can be told with them. Some stories can be completely unrelated to the previous, but tell equally or sometimes even more compelling stories than the original. The antagonists of the story can also determine how well a main character's return is going to be accepted. How many times have you heard of a story that a character who died is coming back to continue when they really shouldn't have been in it? This problem tends to happen due to a lack of creativity, once again showing how important evolving your characters and your story can be if you plan to bring them back once more. There's also just following a different story in the same world. This one's typically the creative one, but it can also have the most blunders. Sometimes it can just be boring, but hey, if you're doing something more extreme like that, it can be good. You never know. Now, I'm not going to say these guarantee success or anything, but they do tend to require more creativity, so they're typically more interesting, and well, if they flop,
maybe 10 years or so, someone's gonna make a video essay about how underrated it is. See, I'm just saying, grand returns and great revivals can be good. They rejuvenate energy into a franchise or continue stories to long thought to be forgotten. And a lot of it truly does boil down to intent, doesn't it? We just gotta think a little more with our heads, especially when these series are required by big executive heads, am I right? Well, you know what? I think we've gone through enough examples and thought processes behind what I personally find good and bad in these grand returns and great revivals, so let us conclude this. Grand returns and great revivals, they sound so epic in name, but it really does feel like all of what we've seen recently is executives realizing that they don't need to make original stories when they can just recycle the same IP until any fans that once were there have left. You'd think that maybe they're just products of their times, that is the great revivals, but the thing is, again and again, even if my definitions aren't the exact thing we keep seeing, so many stories are just being so exhausted so fast. Worlds and characters that I loved are becoming flanderized versions of themselves to do spin-offs and re-releases because we've got to guarantee a sequel. And it's disheartening to say the least, but you know, what can you do? So much of this is just how Hollywood and how media has come to be, you know? But I think our favorite stories are not just ours alone. I can almost guarantee you are never the only fan of a product, especially one that's getting recreated, reimagined, or any other read. As long as we keep having creative minds working on these products to create things that can bolster a story, a world, I think we'll be okay. I think as long as there are people who continue to challenge the standards that we have, even when corporate heads fear change, innovation can take place. And even if that means that it's not perfect, it means the people who do care about their work, they can become inspired and further influence. We're not just cogs in a machine, and I refuse to believe so. We tell amazing stories, we do incredible things, but it just starts with thinking creatively. Thank you. Goodbye now.